Ever wonder why sometimes your decisions don't turn out as planned? It's a question that has puzzled many of us. You see, our minds are intricate and complex machines, but they're not perfect. There are certain mental shortcuts known as cognitive biases that our brains use to speed up decision-making. But these shortcuts aren't always in our best interest. They can lead us astray, causing us to make decisions that seem logical at the time but end up being far from optimal. In our journey today, we'll delve into the captivating world of cognitive biases, exploring how they influence our thinking and decision-making. We'll uncover 5 common traps that our minds often fall into: the confirmation bias, the overconfidence bias, the availability heuristic, the hindsight bias, and the anchoring bias. So, are you ready to peek behind the curtain of your own mind? Stay tuned as we explore these mental traps that can twist our reality. If you liked what you saw so far, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our future videos. The first bias we explore today is the confirmation bias. Let's dive into the workings of this fascinating mental trap that so often ensnares our thinking. Confirmation bias at its core is our tendency to favor, seek out, and even interpret information in a way that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. It's like having a filter on our perception, a lens that selectively focuses on evidence that supports what we already think or believe, while conveniently ignoring or discounting contradicting evidence. Imagine a scenario where you believe that all politicians are dishonest. Your confirmation bias will have you zeroing in on news stories and anecdotes that affirm this belief. You'll likely gloss over instances where politicians act with honesty and integrity, or you might rationalize these as exceptions to the rule. This bias can lead you into a loop of reinforced beliefs, where your viewpoint becomes increasingly one-sided and unbalanced. Or consider when you're faced with a significant decision like buying a car. You've already set your heart on a certain brand because you believe it's the most reliable. Confirmation bias might lead you to only read reviews that praise the brand and ignore those that point out any flaws. This could result in a decision based more on your preconceived notions than on a balanced assessment of the facts. And it's not just our personal beliefs or decisions that are affected. Confirmation bias can have wide-reaching implications in various fields, from science to law enforcement, where a hypothesis might be favored over the actual evidence. Confirmation bias is a powerful force that subtly influences our thinking and decision-making. But it's not all doom and gloom. By acknowledging the presence of the confirmation bias, we can start to challenge our own beliefs, seek out a wider range of information, and strive to make more balanced decisions. It's a step towards more intentional thinking, a step towards not just seeing what we want to see, but seeing what is actually there. By acknowledging the confirmation bias, we can start to challenge our own beliefs and make more balanced decisions. Scene script. Next on the list is the overconfidence bias. Imagine you're an expert in your field. You've spent years honing your skills and accumulating knowledge. You're confident in your abilities, and why shouldn't you be? You've earned it. But what if I told you this confidence might be leading you astray? Welcome to the world of the overconfidence bias. Overconfidence bias refers to our tendency to overestimate our own abilities or the accuracy of our predictions. It's like a mental mirage, making us see our knowledge and skills as more precise and reliable than they actually are. We fall into the trap of thinking we know more than we do, and that, my friends, can lead us into some sticky situations. Let's dive into a real-life example. Picture a seasoned stockbroker who believes they can predict the rise and fall of the stock market with absolute certainty. They've had a few wins, they're feeling confident, maybe even invincible. So they make a bold move, investing heavily in a high-risk stock. But the market is unpredictable and the stock plummets. Suddenly their overconfidence has led to a significant loss. Or consider a skilled surgeon who's performed hundreds of successful surgeries. They're confident, maybe even a little cocky. They decide to perform a complex procedure without consulting their team or reviewing the patient's history thoroughly. The surgery has complications, and the patient's health is put at risk. Again, overconfidence has led to an undesirable outcome. These examples might seem extreme, but they illustrate how the overconfidence bias can subtly influence our decision-making process, leading us to underestimate risks and overestimate our own abilities. But don't despair. Awareness is the first step to overcoming this bias. By recognizing the overconfidence bias, we can start to question our assumptions, double-check our facts, and seek the input of others. We can strive for humility, acknowledging the limits of our knowledge and the unpredictability of life. And so, we find that recognizing the overconfidence bias can help us assess our abilities more accurately and make more realistic decisions. Now, let's dive into the availability heuristic. Imagine you're in a grocery store and you're trying to decide which brand of cereal to buy. Suddenly, a jingle from a cereal commercial pops into your head, and you find yourself reaching for that box. This is the availability heuristic in action. It's a mental shortcut that relies on immediate examples that come to mind when evaluating a specific topic, concept, decision, or question. In essence, the availability heuristic influences our decision-making by making us believe that the examples which are most readily available in our memory are the most important or prevalent. It's like when we think that plane crashes are more common than car accidents because plane crashes are more dramatic and thus more memorable. In reality, car accidents are far more common, but they don't stick in our minds the way plane crashes do. Or consider how news coverage can skew our perceptions. If there's a lot of news coverage about shark attacks, you might start to think that shark attacks are common, even though they're actually incredibly rare. The vivid, frightening images stick in your mind, making shark attacks seem more frequent than they actually are. So how does this play into our everyday lives? Let's say you've been hearing a lot about home burglaries in your neighborhood. Even if the actual rate of burglaries hasn't increased, you might start to believe that they are more common simply because you're hearing about them more often. This could lead you to make decisions based on this perceived increase, like investing in expensive home security systems. The availability heuristic can lead us to make decisions based on what's most readily available in our minds, rather than what's most accurate or relevant. It's important to be aware of this bias, so we can question whether our perceptions are based on reality or simply on what's most memorable. By understanding the availability heuristic, we can avoid being swayed by immediate, yet potentially irrelevant examples. Scene script. Up next is the hindsight bias. Let's dive into another mental trap that can skew our perception. The hindsight bias. Often known as the "I knew it all along" phenomenon, the hindsight bias leads us to believe, after an event has occurred, that we could have predicted or expected it. It's like looking in the rearview mirror and thinking you knew all along what was going to happen. Consider this scenario. You're watching a football game and a player misses a crucial goal. Suddenly you find yourself saying, "I knew he was going to miss, but did you really?" Or is it just the hindsight bias at play, making you believe you had foreseen the outcome? Hindsight bias isn't limited to sports. It rears its head in all areas of life, including financial decisions, political events, and even in our personal relationships. Ever had a friendship fall out and then thought, "I knew we were never going to last as friends"? That's the hindsight bias speaking. This bias can lead us to overestimate our predictive abilities, making us believe we're better at forecasting future events than we actually are. It can also cause us to oversimplify and dismiss the unpredictability of life, leading to incorrect assumptions and poor decision-making. Take the stock market, for instance. After a company's stocks plummet, it's easy to say, "I knew that was going to happen." But if you truly had that foresight, wouldn't you have sold your stocks before the drop? The reality is, predicting the stock market is a complex task, and our hindsight bias can make us think it's simpler than it truly is. But here's the silver lining. By being aware of the hindsight bias, we can start to question our instinctive "I knew it" responses. We can acknowledge the complexity and unpredictability of life, which can help us make more informed and rational decisions. So, the next time you find yourself saying, "I knew that was going to happen," pause and reflect. Was it really predictable, or is it just the hindsight bias tricking you into believing you're a fortune teller? Being aware of the hindsight bias can prevent us from overestimating our predictive abilities. Last but not least, we have the anchoring bias. This mental shortcut is all about the power of first impressions. It's when we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, also known as the anchor, when making decisions. Picture this. You're negotiating a salary for a new job. The employer throws out an initial number, and suddenly, every counteroffer you consider revolves around that initial figure. That's the anchoring bias in action. Or perhaps you're buying a car. The sticker price becomes your anchor, influencing how you view the value of the car and what you're willing to pay. It's important to remember that the anchor may not always represent the most accurate or relevant information, it's just the first one that hit your radar. By acknowledging the anchoring bias, we can avoid being unduly influenced by initial information. And that, my friends, can lead to more informed and rational decisions. So, what can we learn from understanding these cognitive biases? We've dived into the depths of our minds, exploring the fascinating world of cognitive biases. we've discovered how the confirmation bias can make us favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, while the overconfidence bias can lead us to overestimate our abilities. We've seen how the availability heuristic can sway our decisions based on the most readily available information, and how the hindsight bias can trick us into believing that we knew the outcome all along. Lastly, we've uncovered how the anchoring bias can tether our thoughts to an initial piece of information. Each of these biases can influence our thinking and decision-making in subtle and sometimes profound ways. By being aware of these mental shortcuts, we can navigate our daily lives more consciously, avoiding the traps that can lead us astray. Remember, knowledge of these biases is the first step towards making better decisions. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring. If you found this content valuable, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this video. Before we wrap up, we would like to extend an invitation to further your learning and understanding. We have another video that you might find quite interesting. You will learn about the fascinating world of color psychology and discover how different colors can impact our emotions, behavior, and decision-making. Click on the video thumbnail that's on the screen right now to watch the video. Thanks for watching, and remember, your learning journey doesn't end here.